put in Arabic poetry, which is fine. And where would that come from? I think it came from those Subba of southern Iraq who follow John the Baptist. To this day, they're there. To this day. To this day. They're not Jews, they're not Christians. And he's always talking about a group who are not Jews and not Christians when he starts talking about protected people. So then, when he gets to Medina, a new attitude takes over. Because now he's no longer a warner, he's an outsider, a person in trouble. He's actually, after a short time, military commander, general, leader of a community. He's now not just a prophet, he's a military man. Later on, he's like a governor, a president, head of a community. It's like Brigham Young in Salt Lake City. Starts out as a follower of Joseph Smith. I don't know if you have any Mormons in his class. Ends up as the leader and governor of a whole almost independent state of sorts, or country out in Utah, which has thrived ever since. So it turns out he had skills, Brigham Young, for that, right? And more probably than Joseph Smith had. But Muhammad has incorporated all these skills in his own person, and so that's pretty impressive, I think. But you'll see the difference now in Surah 2 of the Quran than the other surahs, because that's what you see in Surah 2, someone organizing a community. Now, why did I mention enemies? I'm going to get to Surah 2 now in a second. Why did I mention enemies? Because Surah 2 is very concerned about enemies. So there are two kinds of enemies there. I mentioned the Jews and Christians, but he doesn't have much to do with Christians because there's not a lot of Christians hanging around these places. So basically he focuses on the Jews, though he says Jews and Christians all of the time, but basically he's talking about Jews on the whole. Because what do? When he comes to a Jewish community and says, I'm the new prophet, and suppose he makes an error here or he makes an error there, what are they going to do? They're going to laugh at him. And that's the worst thing you can do to someone, is laugh at their pretensions. If I go into the Crystal Cathedral, as I said, and with my ideas, I don't know if they're going to laugh at me, but they're going to throw me out in any case. Actually, Muhammad's experience is like Paul's. Paul has all these new ideas, tries to take it to the old people who had the ideas, and of course, it's going to be rejected. I'm not going to go into a mosque with my ideas and expect anyone to accept what I say. That would be ludicrous. What would happen? Hostility, anger, outrage. You know what I'm trying to say? It would happen anywhere. You go into a church with different ideas. What's going to happen to you? Anger, outrage. You go into a Jewish synagogue, the same thing. So people like Paul or Muhammad are going, I mean, that's what people understand. When they say, oh, the Jews are stiff-necked, etc., etc. No, they're just behaving like any normal people who have their own ideas would behave a newcomer who wants to change their customs or thinks that they know more about their customs than they do. Of course they're going to resist that. So, but the new people coming in, they don't have any, as you say, I have neither he camel nor she camel in this. So new people aren't going to feel this hostility to Paul or Muhammad or anyone else. They don't have a stake in these new ideas. It's the old group. So the Jews, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but I think you should understand that, come in for negative feelings both in Christianity and in Islam. And simply because they were the predecessors and they don't want to change. And I can tell you there's no one in this room that I know who wants to change for a new way that they're different from what their parents taught them. This is almost like ancestor worship, worship of the community. And that's just normal, but other people don't give people that, how should we put it, that leeway, that empathy to understand, well, so Paul goes into synagogues in Asia Minor, and they don't like his claims, attacks on Moses. How can you go into a synagogue and attack Moses? I mean, how can you do that? It's just absurd. How can I go into a church and attack Jesus? How can you go into a mosque and attack Muhammad? That would be ridiculous, but he does that. And when he gets thrown out or anything like that, and the people become upset, he gets angry at them. And that's what the book of Acts is all about. And so he's constantly hurling abuse at them. But the people reading Acts are the new people that he's converting elsewhere. So of course they take his side, so they feel angry at the synagogues that didn't take him. But he's taking memberships away from the synagogues. So you see, you have to see it on both sides. You have to, oh, why didn't they accept Paul? how could they accept Paul? It would be impossible. And it was the same situation as in Medina. Muhammad and Paul have a lot in common, but the weird thing is Muhammad doesn't even seem to know or acknowledge Paul in his work, or the angel's work, even though they have a lot in common. Why doesn't Muhammad acknowledge Paul? To my mind, the reason, it doesn't even mention, the reason I think is because the groups that Muhammad was in touch with in Arabia were anti-Pauline groups. Anti-Pauline sectarian Christian groups. You say, were there such groups?